So Kivuva, I hand over to you.
Thank you for joining this meeting. So probably we will wait for another 2 minutes. We see if more people will join and then we start. Hello, good morning, and thank you for joining this meeting. My name is Mwendwa Kivuva from KICTANET, where we run the Tatua Digital Resilience Centre. And KICTANET is a policy think tank from the region where we work on areas to do with research, policy advocacy, multi-stakeholder engagements. And in this training, we have been having several trainings for digital resilience, targeting East African social justice organizations. We have had trainings in Tanzania and Kenya, and in June we'll have some trainings in Uganda. And we've also had several online sessions like this one. So in this training, we will have experts with us who will take us through board and leadership level training on digital resilience. And we will go through some best practices and also some documents that our organizations need to put in place so that we can be digitally resilient. So we thank you so much for being with us, and we will ask you to participate, make comments on the chat, ask questions, and also introduce yourselves on the chat, your name and the organization you represent and the country you come from. With us, we will have our trainers, Dr. Catherine Getao and Dr. Paula Musuva, and they will also be supported by Jacinta Odhaya and Neno Newa. Over to you, Dr. Catherine, and welcome you all.
Good morning, colleagues from around Africa and perhaps beyond. It's a real pleasure and a very great privilege to be with you this morning, to build mutually our capacity. Of course, we have prepared to tell you about digital resilience, but we also will have our capacity built by listening to you, your questions, your concerns, your critiques will help us to continuously improve. So please be a very, very active participant. The reason I keep pressing my screen is to admit as many of you as possible. So if you see my finger, don't be offended. I'll kindly ask Jacinta to share the presentation so that we can get right into our conversation today about digital resilience. And while she's doing that, I maybe should introduce myself a little better. My name is Catherine Gitau. I'm a computer scientist by profession. In my long career, spanning over 40 years, I've been an academic, a researcher, a diplomat, a public servant, and many other roles. So I usually, without any legitimacy, call myself an ICT elder. And therefore, I'm really glad to be moving into this area of digital resilience, which is a very, very pertinent one in today's world. Jacinta, I can't see the presentation as yet. Please, I'd really appreciate if you could load it. Yes, excellent. So please start the presentation. So in this training, we were targeting social justice organizations who have peculiar needs, as we will bring out in this short introduction. Some of you may have attended earlier trainings, in which case this presentation will just be a reminder, but there's some of you who may be here for the first time, so we thought it was important to set the pace by explaining a few key concepts that will help you better appreciate the rest of the material we're planning to present. Next slide, Jacinta. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to start with a pre-workshop survey just to get your expectations. And then I'll do the overview as described, so that just to remind you of some of the key basic concepts in the area of digital resilience. And then Dr. Paula Musuva will take you through the assessment tool, which is available through the Kiktanet, where you can assess your organization. We'll then start talking about strategy issues. You'll have time to interact with us to tell us what your status is and what some of the challenges you're experiencing interactively. Then I'll tell you a little bit about, as a leader of your organization, how you can prepare a policy. And then I'll go on to show you how you can use a playbook to guide action in this area. Dr. Paula then will discuss with you and ransomware incident to just demonstrate some of the things that can happen. Then you'll have time to interact with us through a question and answer session. And finally, somebody from Kiktanet, I'm sure it's Kivuva Mwendwa again, will tell us what next. I'll immediately hand over to Neno to just guide the participants to complete the pre-workshop check-in quiz. Neno, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So we would like to do the check-in survey. As you can see, there's a link. I'm also sending it on the chat.
Please let us know through the chat if you're experiencing any challenges, either scanning the QR code or using the link, which is also in the chat.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. Sorry, I think my light just went off.
Yes, we can hear you, Neno.
For time management, Neno and Jace, please monitor how many people have completed the survey so that maybe in 2 or 3 minutes we can move on. And of course, you can continue filling in the survey even as we present. It just has a few questions. So I'll just give 2 more minutes and then Jace will proceed with the presentation. It's really important for us to get an idea of what your needs were so that we can continuously improve the training. So please do fill in this survey. Time moves very slowly when you're having fun. I think, Jace, let's just proceed with the presentation. I'm sure. Okay, so next slide. Next slide, Jace. Okay, so social justice organizations, we cannot handle you just as we would maybe as a small and medium enterprise or an academic institution, because you have some unique characteristics. Most are not for profit. Most have to raise their resources, and therefore that's not easy in today's world when there's so many demands and you may have limited resources and gaps. This leads to gaps in your budget, having maybe to do with without some essential skills and without some technology which you might consider desirable. And therefore, you might work in lower technology environments. But at the same time, many of your clients are on social media. Many of your stakeholders are on social media. So there's often vibrant engagement with you and by you in that area. And of course, you focus on protecting human rights and social justice. Those are points of uniqueness. And as a result of your points of uniqueness, you also face distinct risks and threats. Sometimes the authorities are a little bit suspicious of your true aims and who is backing you because of these fundraising needs. And you may be the subject of surveillance activities. You may be the subject of regulations that can be emerging and becoming very complex. and even the operating environment, because you may be handling issues which are not popular among sections of the population. Of course, from your funders and those who are interested in you as stakeholders, there's a need to demonstrate that the money they're giving you and the time they're giving you is leading to an impact in the interest group or your stakeholder group. And of course, that you are exercising transparency and integrity in everything you do. And there's also the continuous emerging technologies. I was telling somebody 2 years ago, most people had not even heard of artificial intelligence. Now, many of us are using it every day. So these emerging technologies come in very fast. And when you don't have the skills, you don't have the funding, it's sometimes very challenging to handle the new world that is created by the emerging technology. Next slide, Jace. So we've defined digital resilience as the ability of an organization to maintain its mandate, mission, and strategic objectives while there is a threat of digital disruption, during a disruption, and after a disruption. So here in Kenya, we recently experienced serious floods, and resilience was those organizations and people where life was able to go on despite the many inconveniences and even actual harm and damage that was created by the floods. So in the same way, there's a flood of technology, and we need to keep on, able to keep on doing what we're supposed to be doing despite those disruptions. So are we able to respond effectively? Are we able to sustain relationships? I know during the floods, we were finding it very difficult to have physical family meetings because some of us live in areas that were cut off by the floods. So how do you keep on seeing your clients, seeing your stakeholders despite digital disruptions? And then continuous delivery of your services and core operations, because that's why you exist, to deliver those social justice services. Compliance with regulations. I remember in the flooding, there was a time we were threatened that we'd be charged with attempted suicide if we tried to go out when there was serious flooding. So this was a regulation which many people are not aware of, and suddenly they were at risk of not complying with that regulation. And that can happen during digital disruptions as well. And of course, given your huge exposure to social media, there's the issue of reputation and brand identity, which can be very much damaged when you're the subject of social media campaigns, or even when somebody tries to steal your desirable brand identity as you exist in the environment. Next slide. Okay, so in this, to help the social justice, we actually uniquely came up with a digital resilience framework that was very much geared towards social justice organizations. Next slide. Yeah, so it had 3 phases. The pre-disruption, meaning when you're just going on business as usual. And of course, that doesn't mean that something is not going to happen. So we use that time before a disruption happens to really harden and strengthen our organizations, so that if the worst does happen, or the disruption, which is doesn't have to be negative, can also be a positive disruption, we need to be ready and to build ourselves, build our strength, build our resilience before something happens. So we focus on 3 areas, especially for leaders. The governance area, that is the leadership and oversight. the architecture that is really hardening your technology, your devices, your network, your systems, and the protection area. What do you need to do to protect your digital assets, such as data, to protect your systems from malware, to protect your devices from theft, and to protect your people. So all these things can be done while you're in that steady state where there's no disruption. But for some of us, at least, a disruption is going to happen. So we need to be able to detect that the disruption, and later I'll talk about advanced persistent threats, which are disruptions which are designed not to be detected. And they can go on in your system for years and you're not aware of them. So detection is very important. Containment, meaning you don't want things to get worse. You don't want more damage to occur. You don't want more disruptive activities to follow. So you have discovered the disruption and now you contain it. And finally, there's eradication, managing that disruption if it's a positive one, but also getting it completely out of your environment so that it no longer continues to do any type of harm as you proceed. Then post-disruption, so you've learned. A disruption is always a learning experience. I'm sure we've learned a lot from past disruptions, from introductions of technology into the environment. We all survived COVID, that's why we're here today. So after COVID, there are practices that we adopted to make sure that next time we're not caught flat-footed. And after any digital disruption, it's important to bring those learnings back into our organization so that we are better prepared for any future disruptions. So there are three things there as well: restoring our organization to its previous steady state, but perhaps even better than it was before. Learning from anything, weaknesses that we discovered in our capacity, in our organizational structure, in our technology, and then incorporating that learning into the way we manage our technology, our people, and our operations. And then finally, there's innovation. There's so many innovations that came out of a big disruption, such as COVID, which have become part of our normal lives. So disruptions are not always bad. They are also an opportunity to learn and grow and even to bring new and better things into our environment. So I hope it's our approach to digital resilience for SJOs is very clear through this framework. And today we're going to focus mostly on some tools that you can use during these three stages of digital resilience. So this was just to give you the context. Next slide. Okay, so now I hand over to Dr. Paula Musuva-Kigen to tell us a little bit about what you can do to figure out where you are right now as far as digital resilience is concerned. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you so much, Dr. Getao. Welcome, everyone. When we started, we were fewer as we were doing the overview, but I can see we are much more now. We're about 29 on the call. Karibuni sana. I think just to reiterate what we said as we started, please introduce yourself on the chat. We just want to recognize you as you join and also interact with you. Just to also acknowledge that Tijan Kisilu has been able to do that. So welcome, thank you Tijan. And we can see that you're from AfriCog. And we just want to get to know you better even as we connect and do this training so that we can also address your needs and make sure that we live with a very productive use of our time. So as you can see on the screen, and thank you Jacinta for sharing the screen. As you can see, there's a link to the Tatua assessment tool, which we will use to just be able to take a few minutes and reflect where we are, considering the framework that Dr. Getao has taken us through. Can we gauge where exactly we are with regards to our digital resilience posture? So what I want to invite you to do in an interactive way is to visit that, oh, sorry, it's Tijani. Okay, sorry about that. So just what I want to invite you to do is kindly follow that link, bit.ly/Tatua assessment tool, and the three words are separated by the dashes. And maybe give me a thumbs up if you're there. And I'll give us a minute to load. I've already loaded mine. And so once we start off, I'll be sharing my screen so that we can walk through this together. Great. Thank you so much, Salima Joki from Inuk, Kenya. Just want to recognize you. Amina from Tanzania. Rachel Mudhoni from Defenders Coalition. Charles Richard Lukindo from CCLI Foundation in Tanzania. Halima Hani Osman from the Youth Congress. Dr. Rose Ruben from Tanzania Media Women's Association. Karibu sana. All right, so thank you. So let's just keep the messages coming in so that then we can also, so I'm going to now share my screen. I think I've given you a minute to be able to do so. And I'll start with the welcome screen. So when you load the link, you should be coming to this particular screen with the Digital Resilience Assessment tool. And what I'll do is I'll do a quick walkthrough so that you have a feel of the things you really need to consider when you're doing the assessment of your posture, digital resilience posture. Now, I already have a pre-filled score. And the way I'd want to do, just so that for us to save time, is to walk you through maybe some of the things that would already be in a pre-filled score. And I would also invite you, if you wanted to do this, you can follow along. But as you can see, it's indicated that this would take about 30 minutes. Now, what we've also done is that we've enabled the ability for you to save your responses and come back to them. And to do that, we are collecting an email address that can be attached to that form. And what happens is when you fill out the form, it will send you a copy of that form to that email address. And you have a link with which you can come back and review your response. So as you can see, the first thing we do is indicate that we might collect some sensitive information regarding your organization and also its operations. So the name, the email, the role of the organization, and the program that your organization runs. And the idea here is also to create a context around the assessment so that it is not independent of that, because we know that depending on the size of the organization, you may have different, level of resources and capacity or capability to implement digital resilience, but also maybe your exposure may be different. So depending on the size of the organization, you may have less exposure or even more exposure. So we want to be able to take those into consideration. And the way the tool is designed is that after you do the response, after you fill in the form, we contact you from the Tatua Center. You get someone contact you from the Tatua Center in order to review your score and then to put it within context. So, and to just have a discussion about the challenges you may be having. I'm sorry, actually, this is a good reminder. I should have introduced myself. So my name is Dr. Paula Musuba. I'm an assistant professor from United States International University, Africa, here in Nairobi. And my background is computer science. And I've been in the industry for 18 years, over 18 years now, doing work within the area of cybersecurity. I started off as a network engineer, implementing network security solutions, the typical ones you hear of, securing the routing and switching, implementing firewalls and intrusion detection systems and being able to fine-tune those, and also helping organizations develop their cybersecurity policies. So that has been my background from the time I started this work. But I've also worked as a technology consultant, where I've worked with organizations through their digital transformation journey and worked on different projects in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia. I've also worked in just different areas, different countries across Africa. So as you can see, I did a little bit of pre-filling, and we try also to establish where your country and offices are, and also try and get your organization's mission and strategic objectives, and maybe even your area of operational focus. You can also fill in with your names and your contact information, and we'll also be asking for a contact person so that we can have a conversation with you. You would now also need to give us a profile, because one of the things we're trying to do is also understand the size of the organization based on the employees or the staff. So if you're working, if you have a board, indicate if you have members of staff, if you have any interns, if you have volunteers, also on contract, workers on contract who are part of your SJO. So just give us a feel of that so that we can have a good feel in terms of your assessment. And then also you can give us an estimated size of your clientele base and who that clientele typically is. So what we did is we had a run through the KICTANet partners and the ones that they're working with on this particular project, and we tried to map out some of the different areas the SJOs are working on. So are you working with people with disabilities? But the list is quite long, so I won't go through them, but just have a look. And also want to encourage some feedback. So even as I go through this, if you find that there's something that needs to be rethought or added, kindly do let us know, and we'll appreciate that, and we'll take that into consideration. So just indicate which, and it can be multiple areas in which you provide your services, and you can give us a size of your annual budget and specify the currency that you're working with. And then also you can describe what kind of funding that you rely on, and if it's government, if it's donors, and if you're also self-sustaining and you have some form of revenue, kindly just indicate that. And also you can indicate the 3 most critical operations for your SJO. And please, I might not have fleshed these things out properly, but just kind of think about the things that you tend to do. And here probably you'd be thinking of, if you have any support, like if you're working with people with disabilities, what are some of the critical things that you must do as an SJO to work with people with disabilities? If you're working with the youth and women or the minorities, what are your critical operations in serving that constituency? So that's the area for just the operations that need to be really considered and thought through. Now, the other thing is we now start working through the sections we believe are important in being able to gauge your digital resilience. And these were already outlined in the framework. And I know we've already held a previous training on in a very detailed way where we went through the components of that digital resilience framework. And we delved deep into the different components. So what we do in this particular survey is pick some of the key parts. And we're asking simple yes and no answers just to simplify the assessment and to be able to put a value, just a simple quantitative way in which we can give you a score at the end of the form. So here we have the first section touching on governance, and you saw that in the pre-disruption section. And here, the emphasis is on a couple of things: strategy, how you've thought about your leadership on technology, whether you've really taken time to write your policies, whether you've considered risk management, outsourcing of your IT services and how that is handled. And I'm sure many SJOs outsource their services. Whether you've thought through your financial protection, any of your systems that handle finances. And we all know that days of queuing in a bank are really gone. A lot of our transactions are facilitated by IT systems. including a lot of reliance on the mobile phone. So we want a reflection on whether we have really thought about what happens should there be a failure or a compromise or an attack on those platforms that actually give you your financial services. And then there's also the incident response part, which is very critical. So we just ask a few questions on each of these sections. So just to also give you a feel of this, I'll just walk you through this. So do you have a digital resilience strategy, right? Has your strategy been reviewed in the last 1 year? So it's not that you have something that is shelved, right? Is there some form of enforcing compliance to this strategy? And is the digital strategy able to guide the organization at each level of an incident response process should you be attacked? Let's talk about leadership. What level is your senior most digital expert? And we understand maybe based on your SJOs, because IT is not a core part of your business, you may be either bundling the IT role with maybe operations, but you might also be relying on a service provider who hosts for you, let's say your website, who does for you your email services. So we understand that those things may be there, but want to see whether there's a thought process about who is leading or who owns that element of the digital aspect of the organization. Are there clear job descriptions, right? Is there a way of remediation of identified weaknesses? Like if somebody pointed out that there's an issue, what is a process in fixing that? And is the board updated on the effectiveness of the control? So the board engagement and oversight is extremely important from a strategic perspective. And then also risk management. Has the board been updated on the exposures, risk exposures? Does the board get threat intelligence reports around the risk environment? Does the organization update its risk register? So this is an element of where you literally outline the areas of risk which have been measured and assessed, and you want to monitor and track them to resolution, and therefore you keep them within a risk register, and you're also tracking the mitigation efforts that have been identified and whether they are being applied. What's your risk appetite? What is the organization comfortable with living with in terms of a level of risk? Is there reporting and regular reporting? You know, when the board meets, is the board given a report also on terms of the risk assessment, the organization controls, and how well they are working? Yeah. Then we have a section on outsourcing. So is there a proper understanding? Is the board well informed of the benefits? I think we focus a lot on the benefits and costs, but also what about the opportunities and risk when it comes to outsourcing of IT services? Is there a strategy around outsourcing, or is it that we just outsource when we need it? Have you thought through the performance indicators that will really tell you whether your outsourcing arrangement is working well or not? Does it consider also the vendor? Is your outsourcing strategy also thinking about the vendor risks and the vendor's exposure? The cybersecurity reports tell us that a huge percentage of the attacks now are coming through the supply chain, through third-party vendors. If you're in development of software, third-party utilities that are integrated, and you're very reliant on what other people have done, but maybe you've not really taken time to check how secure those components and your reliance on those third-party services is. Then you can see here, are you well guided with a service level agreement in defining exactly how this outsourcing should take place and what are the expectations of that? Is there an exit strategy that has been thought through, even with outsourcing? Is there consideration of IP, intellectual property, even when you're thinking about this outsourcing? Is there consideration on the robustness of the contracts in protection of data and privacy? Are there clauses that actually address that? The other thing is also compliance with digital data and jurisdiction laws. Is that clearly spelled out in the outsourcing plan? Then there's financial protection. So this is also another area where we gauge your resilience. So this is in the area of the financial platforms that the organization is dependent on. Is there a policy that guides the identification, evaluation of these financial platforms before they are used? Do you really think through them before they are used? Are there some legal contracts or agreements with the financial providers that will facilitate the use of some of these platforms? What is the policy with regards to financial records? Okay, and this is now we're looking at the financial records from the point of creation all the way to disposal. And how do you track that? So it's not just relation to audit, because sometimes we do this because of auditors, but also with regards to digital resilience. Are you able to monitor and manage these financial transactions? And are you able to track for their legitimacy and correctness, right? And this could be through the use of some form of monetary software or some alerts, but also the good old reconciliation where you have some form of oversight and people are actually able to reconcile the financial statements, correctness of the financial transactions, okay? Then there's a section on policies and procedures, and we highlight some of the policies and procedures that are very critical for digital resilience. For example, disaster recovery policies, data classification and protection policies, cybersecurity awareness, right? Because a lot of these issues are also bent on the exposure, the level of knowledge that people have. Then remote access. And I know we pointed out COVID days, even as we started, and we all opened up our, operations and our access to our systems to remote access. So have we really thought through that, and have we considered ways of strengthening remote access to make sure it's secure? IT service outsourcing, we've mentioned that. Social media. Right? And we recognize that many SJOs really are reliant on social media to reach your constituents and to really engage with them. Is there a policy around the social media use and protections around that? Could there be a possibility that your social media account is hijacked, for example? What does that mean for the reputation of your SJO? What protections have been put in place for your social media? Is there a basic multi-factor authentication enabled, which is what you would expect? Let's say even ability to recover your social media account should it be tampered with. So these features are there, but sometimes we don't use because we've really not thought through the element of digital resilience. And then we're also going to be addressing the element of playbooks, and Dr. Getao will be taking us through that later. But is there a formal plan to implement policies, plans, and playbooks that have been thought through in your organization? Are there some formal target and an evaluation methodology around this? All right. Does the board authorize the implementation of those playbooks? So there's a process of developing those policies, plans, and playbooks. The board looks at them, vets them, and then champions their implementation. And also the testing to just see whether those are working and whether they need to be rethought. And also whether the management also is engaged and receives regular reports on the implementation of those playbooks. And then we come to the area of incident response and recovery strategies. And here we really want you to reflect on these very key elements of digital resilience: incident response, disaster recovery, continuity planning, innovation, and learning. So do you actually have the detailed plans for each of this? Are there some measures that have been put in place for timely detection of incidences? Is there like a well-developed playbooks that can monitor the top threats? And I can tell you, like, anytime you want to really figure out what's going, you can pull up, let's say, the Communications Authority quarterly reports. You can pull up some of the reports that I've probably also been exposed to and been part of, is like the Seriano cybersecurity reports. You can also go international and pull some of the reports coming, let's say, from the vendors, the main critical vendors that we rely on, let's say Cisco for the network, or Microsoft, because many of us are using Microsoft technologies. They're always telling you what are the attacks they're seeing, and they give this in a very regular manner. There are also reports on, let's say, data breaches. There's a very popular data breach investigations report that you can always get. So these reports are there, which you can use to say, okay, if I was to be hit, if I was to be targeted in a form of a cyber attack, or one that would compromise my digital infrastructure, these are probably the top ones. Have I really thought through them and really thought about how I'm going to recover and continue operating should those actually play out? Yeah. So then, is there clear guidance from the board on how to handle communication? Communication is such a critical point when you're hit by some disruption. So does the organization have the capacity to contain and eradicate these incidences, right? Has the organization put in a process for incidents closure and root cause analysis? You're not closing that incident until you've really thought through what was the root cause, what enabled this to actually work. And are there some budgetary, is there budget allocation to facilitate the repair and recovery of systems? Because this tends to happen during disruptions. And, is there a place to get also external support? And Tatua Digital Resilience Centre is definitely one of those that you should be thinking of getting in touch with should you be having any digital disruption incident. And then we're also saying, has the organization invested in resources and trained its teams for this recovery process? Do you test your plans? Is there at least a yearly cycle of testing these plans? Is there a way of tracking and monitoring these incident response measures, such that at any point we can have a dashboard of our the things that we struggled with through this period or this year, but these are the lessons we learned, and this is how we are fortifying our systems and improving them so that this doesn't happen again. Yeah, and also threat intelligence, being able to get in feeds or inputs from other organizations based on what they're seeing. So remember, you don't want to be caught up in the trees. You need to be able to see the forest for the trees. What that basically means is there could be things that are happening, not just to you, but also to other similar organizations as you, and you could benefit from being able to receive that intelligence of what's going on within the threat environment that you're in. Also, are you able to identify the innovative technologies that could enhance your ability to sustain yourself in the midst of disruption? So what we're saying is that, yes, digital resilience is about disruptions, maybe even relating to, like if we look at COVID, we were cut off from being able to move around, even during the floods that Dr. Getao mentioned as we were starting. So you're probably marooned, you're not able to move around as much as you would. What innovative ways can you use technology, or even what innovative technologies can you use to still help you be able to operate and continue to serve the people you're serving as an SJO, right? So this is the way you can also look at technology positively, even in the form of assisting you in the midst of disruption. And also, are there some policies that guide you in your selection of and adoption of these emerging technologies? And then we also have a section on not just this, but the technology itself and the protective features you can enable in the technology. And I'm now conscious of time. I think I've taken more than the 10 minutes I had. So here we actually walk you through the different elements of protections that you really need to think through. Well thought through ICT architecture and the key components, having some digital assets. Do you have a digital asset register? Have you thought through even your procurement plans? Is there a possibility that there might be some disruption even with regards to how you're handling your procurement, right? Have you thought through the protective measures of digital security, but also physical security, right? Ability to track devices, should there be theft or loss? I know there's remote wiping also, not just remote tracking, where if a device is stolen, you can actually commission it to wipe itself to factory reset. Are you thinking of the use of CCTV? Especially for your places where there are key operations, backup sites and switch over sites, right? Are you also checking in terms of standards of validity for your digital assets, right? Are you thinking through your asset life cycle, like we mentioned, from procurement all the way till you retire the asset? Are you thinking through the configurations, right? Do you have valid licenses? Because also the issue could be that you're using unlicensed software. Unlicensed software is also likely to have backdoors and other things that are likely to also compromise the security of your system. Do you have a protected repository of your assets, right? Also your core applications tested. Do you have somebody who's reviewed your core applications to check whether they are secure and securely implemented, right? Do you have some elements of standards and policies for also doing things like, for example, segmentation of your network, well-configured devices, data loss prevention, all right? And also policy guidelines on user account creation, handling of logs, proper password design, and are people well educated about that? Privilege access management, again, it's the super user accounts that tend to be attacked, right? Protection of software keys and licenses. Do you know which are your critical digital assets? Have you prioritized and scheduled the testing of those, let's say using audits, vulnerability assessments, or penetration tests? Is there a plan for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing? And also maybe just to throw in a comment here, that the Tatua Digital Resilience Centre also will be looking to see whether it can support you in these areas of just checking whether your systems are well secured. Is there elements of malware protection that you've considered? And have you also looked at procuring anti-malware defenses? And are these well installed and updated? So there are all these features of the anti-malware defenses that need to be thought through. Have you secured your endpoint devices, right? Do they have the proper software configuration? And endpoints here, we're talking about laptops and PCs and your handheld devices. Have you thought through backup? And I'll be talking about this when I'll be talking about the backups element of endpoints when we look at our ransomware case study. And there are very easy solutions that are out there that many of us don't use, but they're available. Also, bring your own device policies. Have those been thought through and commissioned? And also different network defenses that would be vital for there to be a really secure implementation to protect your network, okay? And then we also think about the data. Is being a very important element. So has the organization really thought, does it have a data strategy? Does it know its key data assets? Has it maintained a data register? Is there a clear policy for classifying your data, right? Whether it's classified, whether it has some sensitive information that should only be kept internal, and how do you handle those particular cases? If you're collecting sensitive data, which I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, are doing, this would also include HR. If you have staff and HR data that's classified as that, any intellectual property, any financial records that are of, which would always be sensitive, storing of your data about your suppliers, and again, reiterating the need for the board to be aware of the data protection legislation, and even if possible that the board has also been gone through some awareness training to just understand the actual clauses and what need to be addressed. And also, where would you be when you gauge your maturity in terms of handling your data. And also just in terms of laws, very important that the board be aware of the laws, not just the data protection regulation, but any laws that are important for the board in terms of its oversight to make sure that the organization is compliant too. There could be many laws with regards, especially maybe in your area of working with minors or people like children and also the minorities. It's important to be well aligned, and some of those laws could be local, but they could also be international. All right. So it's very important to be compliant as an organization. Are there plans to retain talent that is competent in digital technologies? Is there proper training on cyber hygiene measures, right? Is there responsibility around navigating digital disruptions? And are there clear guidelines around that? And also, are there robust contracts with regards to the developers of some of your assets and technologies? And are staff members trained in order to be able to handle the platforms that they're using securely? Encryption, the use of specific software like VPN, have people been trained about that? Have people been trained on how to use secure channels? You're in a very sensitive area. Maybe you're sending data to people on, like you're doing protection of people who are running away from very oppressive governments. How do you handle communication in a secure way where these people will not be tracked or identified? And some of this actually leads to a loss of life. Also, social media policies and branding around this, continuous monitoring and tracking of social media campaigns, and just being able to see whether your social media channels are also secure. So, so this is an outline, and like I said, just a walkthrough. And from this, you'll be able to get a score similar to this. And it also tells you that, you know, these are the contact, we have a contact information. You can also see your response. Like I said, this will also be emailed to you, and you can also be able to review and also update your responses. So thank you for your patience. I know it has taken a while to run through that. I just want to probably also encourage you to give feedback on the oh, sorry, I just seen the chat from, so I just also want to encourage you to also give your feedback on the chat section, and would be able to take that in. So thank you very much. So handing it back over.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Paula. That was really a marathon, and thank you for taking us through it. I would encourage participants, and I welcome all of you. All of my team know that I'm growing a little older, so I try not to confuse myself too much. So if I don't mention names, just forgive me, because I'm trying not to overload my brain. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Paula. Please don't feel discouraged that the assessment tool is very detailed. Note that the issues are not just technical, but organizational issues, HR issues, some of your policies to do with suppliers and so on. So it is a tool that is supposed to be filled as a team, involve your technical person, involve somebody in leadership who understands the organization quite well. Don't be discouraged by the score, because it's just a starting point. And it's really just to reveal some of the key areas where we can start having programs. But remember that cyber resilience, it's a journey, it's not a destination. No one can say that they are fully digitally resilient, because there are new issues every day. So we just walk along the journey, strengthening our organization every day as matters are revealed to us. So Jace will proceed with the strategy part of the presentation, which you can project as now. Okay. So we're going to talk about strategy. And I think one of the things that the assessment tool reveals is that you really need to start this work to make your organization more digitally resilient. So I'll introduce the subject. I'll talk about how you can make your organization appreciate digital resilience, assess where you are, and we've seen the assessment tool, aspire to be better or to move along. I'm sorry, I'm trying to admit people as I go. Arrange your organization better, act, and then appraise your progress. So these are really just all A's so that you become an all A organization when it comes to cyber resilience, and to help you to remember the 6 A's. Next slide. So where are you in this resilience journey? How important is resilience to your organization? Resilience is desirable if you're already using digital applications or money, which I think most of us are, both as individuals and organizations. If you're part of the social media, it's important or desirable. And if you're making you own or use any type of digital technology, and that I've talked about mobile phones and laptops, but nowadays we have CCTV cameras, we have printers and photocopiers, which have a digital technology aspect. So if you're using the technology, you're using social media, and you're using any type of application, including digital money, which many of us use nowadays, then resilience is very desirable. It becomes more important if you own a digital resource, such as a website or a portal, an email application, or some kind of digital app which you're using to reach your clients or stakeholders. If you digitally communicate using email or other messaging apps with your clients or your supporters or other stakeholders, or if you rely on digital suppliers or technology in order to deliver your products or to run your operations, then resilience becomes even more important. And next slide. But resilience is critical if your corporate finances have been digitized. You have an online banking account, or your payments are received digitally, then it becomes really, really, really critical. Or if you are a provider of critical digital services or infrastructure. I know some of you may be involved in providing connectivity to other organizations. You may be providing social support. You deliver money or something else to your clients digitally. Then if any of those things is true, then you are a resilient critical organization, and you should be listening even more carefully to everything that we are discussing today. Next slide. So the first thing is to make the organization appreciate digital resilience, because we're not going to devote time, energy, or resources to digital resilience if we don't appreciate how important it is to our specific organization. And why is it, from the board, sometimes some organizations just think that digital resilience is the subject of just the IT team in the organization, and the rest of the organization, the board, the senior management, the executives, they just ignore it. And if anything happens, then that's IT's baby, and it's not really ours. But it's not true. All of us are exposed to existing and emerging threats, and you've just seen the 3 areas I've discussed, and I'm sure all of them have resonated with you, either as a person or as an organization. We've seen others experience something. I'm sure when we saw family members or friends suffering from COVID, we realized it's a real threat. And I'm sure there are organizations which have anecdotes, even here among us today, that can tell us what happened to them when they suffered a digital disruption. So we can learn from the experience of others. Now, the impact of a digital incident will affect not just our existing, the things it's attacking, in other words, digital technology, but it can affect our finances. We can lose money, or we can lose support because we looked very careless in the way we're handling our money after a major loss. It can affect our reputation. You've seen how quickly things, I don't know whether now they're called X storms, but Twitter storm, or somebody running a campaign against the issue that you address or your organization in particular. And it can be so damaging because it reaches the whole world and makes people think about you differently. You can also lose your competitive advantage. I was told not to use the word competition, but even when there's funding, you're competing with other SJOs in the same area as you are. So the effect on your reputation or your finances can make you stronger or weaker as an SJO in your sector. And then, of course, it's not all bad news. Digital technology also provides opportunities and advantages. AI can meet some of your capacity gaps because you can get information which previously you would have had to pay an expert a lot of money, or maybe you don't even have that competence in your organization, and AI can be a starting point. And many other technologies have really provided opportunities, even the technology we're using today. Before, it would have cost us millions of shillings to convene this kind of a training as we flew all over, all of you, to a venue. But now you can go on with your lives, you can go on with your normal work, you can stay in place and yet receive high quality training using these conferencing and interactive tools. And then lastly, there's the issue of digital laws and regulations, which can hit you hard if you don't comply. And these are continuously emerging, especially in the digital area. And we'll discuss some of them when we come to the playbook. Next slide. So what do you need to do? If you are a board or a leader of an SJO, then you need to start taking charge, because as I said, it's not all about technology. It's also about major risks and the survival of your organization. Focus on building a proactive organization that takes action before. We don't have to wait until we're in the disruption to start our resilience program. You don't have to despair and say, I have to do so many things. You can start small. There are the critical actions which can have a huge effect. COVID was controlled in Africa just by a few public health measures. So we can see how a big effect a small action can have on building your digital resilience. And of course, you have people, and you'll see when I do the playbook, you'll see that you already have people who can help in the digital resilience journey, and you can harness them and get them involved in this effort. Next slide. So we're moving from just appreciating to assessing, and I won't say much here because you've already seen the assessment tool. When you get the materials, we'll also expose you to other assessment tools created by other partners and actors. So we're not telling you just the one, but you certainly need to know where you are, and you'll be helped by going through a self-assessment tool. Remember to contextualize. So if you're just a small organization, don't create an impossible program for yourself. Just a few actions will create progress. And you'll choose those actions by prioritizing the major things that need to be done, and some of them will become clear through this training. And also pace yourself. Resilience is not a 1 hour effort. You know, it will take years, and actually you will always be continuously building your resilience. So pace yourself, give yourself a reasonable time frame to improve your resilience. And I've said there, you can learn from sister organizations, so you don't always have to go to a paid expert. You can also visit one another, discuss, attend programs such as this in order to continuously learn. And of course, there are a lot of resources on the internet, which are very usable. But when you have really serious areas, don't hesitate to call in the experts, which include the Tatua Center. Next slide. So aspire. As human beings, vision is what motivates and moves us. You're going to have to enhance your security. So look at your digital devices and architecture and improve them as time goes on, protect your data, and also build your human capacity and your ability to lead and govern resilience issues. Then you should have an aspiration to maintain your continuity. Stakeholder connections. What is often attacked is your relationship, your good relationship with your stakeholders, such as your clients and your funding agency. So keeping in touch with them and keeping those relationships healthy and alive is important. Considering alternative ways of doing your operations and keeping communication, even when one communication channel is attacked during a digital disruption. So how else can we do things? I get really annoyed because I travel a lot, where some of the airports and visa issuance has become digital. And if for some reason the system is down, people just queue up and nothing is happening. Really, a digitally resilient organization would have worked out another way of doing their operations when the digital system is disrupted. I'll ask my friends and co-facilitators who are hosts, please to take the admission burden in the waiting room so that I don't keep interrupting.
Yes, sorry about that. We'll do that.
Please watch the waiting room and admit people. And then how do you continue business even in the face of a digital disruption? Then there's an aspiration to communicate effectively on social media, on traditional media, and on private channels. Relationships are really important here in Africa, in the social justice space, and in all spaces. And those relationships are often being maintained through these media, and they can also be damaged through these media. So communication, effective communication is a very important part of digital resilience. Next slide. Okay, so another responsibility of boards and leaders is to strengthen the organizational culture. And we should have a culture of digital resilience. In fact, I feel that Africans are some of the most resilient people in the world. And many of our skills and competencies, we can now extend them to the digital area. So part of building that culture is telling your people you're leaders, not followers. Whether you are the receptionist at or the security guard at the gate, whether you are the head of the organization, whether you are a board member, you are all digital leaders. You can identify risks and threats. You can take quick action to mitigate issues and not just be a spectator, be a leader. Love your organization. Resilient organizations are organizations where people love the work they do, they love the organization, and therefore they do everything that they can in order to protect it. And they have a sense of ownership of the organization, its clients, its technology. And you know, when you own something, you tend to look after it. Yeah, so this is the kind of culture. Boards and leaders, you are always responsible for culture. And therefore, this is why I'm saying all these things. And finally, but not least, promoting transparency and trust. Trust is the most important resource in the digital realm. If you lose trust, you've lost it. And trust can be lost in an instant. So you have to really think about that transparent relationship and communication with all your stakeholders so that they don't lose trust in your organization due to a digital disruption or even as a result of the activities of the disruption. Now, future-proof your vision. You know, it should not just be about procuring malware protection or whatever, you know, technological issues. It's principles. Principles mean saying something like, our organization is able to provide services to clients regardless of what's happening. That's the principle. So if what is preventing you from providing those services is a digital disruption, then you know that you have to deal with it. Or you can say that we communicate regularly with our stakeholders. That's a principle. So if the digital disruption is preventing you from communicating with your stakeholders, then you know that you need a digital resilience measure to make sure that it does not continue to impact you in that fashion. And then you focus on resilient relationships. For me, I can't emphasize enough that life and also business and operation, it's all about relationships. So let's keep those those relationships protected and resilient against digital disruptions. And of course, your operations, what you do. The next thing you need to have in your strategy is how you're going to arrange things. It's important to clarify and set out your goals. What is your vision? What are your priorities in this strategic time? And what is your measure of success? How will we know whether we're digitally resilient or not if you have not set out the measures? Then setting out the preparations, building teams, and you're really going to see that when we get to the point of the playbooks. And of course, as a leader, you're also the one that allocates resources, and some of these resources definitely in this time must go towards digital resilience. Next slide. How do you implement the plans? You know, we're usually teased, especially in Kenya, that we're very good at having all kinds of plans in place, but they just remain as books and documents in our inbox or somewhere, but we don't really use them. So within your strategy, you have to say how you're going to implement the plans. If you're the board, how are you going to motivate and approve policies and strategies? How are you going to set out the implementation programs, flag them off, but also continuously monitor them to make sure that you're moving towards the goals? And spur continuous awareness creation and capacity building. Recently, I was commenting that there's some habits we had all picked up during the COVID period, such as washing hands, such as wearing masks, especially when we are not well, and so on. And I was trying to observe how many of them have continued to be habits. Some of us, maybe many of them, others have already abandoned. So human beings are like that. So you can't say, oh, we finished the resilience program, everybody has gone through the course and they know what to do. We have to keep reminding them. We have to keep the resilience agenda alive in our organization continuously. Otherwise, we'll start falling back. Then how do we sustain the effort. Testing, of course, is it really working? And you saw in the assessment tool, there are questions about whether you actually test the procedures and standards and so on that you come up with, or they just remain on paper. Do you actually check that they're at work? Of course, monitoring and evaluation, you guys are really the experts, so I don't need to say much there. And then encouraging a culture of agility and continuous improvement. Then the reality checks. Resilience can be an expensive exercise. So how do we do it in our limited capacity? And the words I used were contextualizing, prioritizing, and pacing, so that you fit the resilience agenda into your capacity and resources that you have, but you are able to scale up as your organization becomes bigger or more complex. And as Africans, we're so good at forming communities and collaborating with one another. And this is the one of our strategies in the face of having limited resources. So the Tatua Center is there to help you, but also you can work together with other organizations to mutually build your resilience so that it becomes achievable and feasible for all of you. There are things you can share, there are trainings you can share, there are staff you can share, you can help one another when an incident is occurring and one organization has not been attacked. It can give up some of its capacity and resources to help the other organization keep its operations alive and also deal with a specific incident. Next slide. So let's look at some pre-disruption activities and some of the roles of the board and the executive. The board obviously comes from people who are broadly in the sector, but also from outside. So they'll tend to be very aware of what's going on in the environment, and they'll be able to bring that knowledge in. And that is very, very important towards anticipating future sources of disruption, managing risks. The board is really responsible for stakeholder management. They're the big guys who really deal with important stakeholders such as funding agencies, regulators, and that's part of their role. And of course, making sure that these strategies are developed. You've been given some guidance, but now you need to go into the organization and say, we are asking the management to develop this strategy and we will approve and oversee it. And of course, very important, mobilizing and allocating resources is a primary responsibility of boards. So the executive implementing the plans, ensuring that cyber hygiene is operationalized in the organization and that the cybersecurity measures are taken, managing the staff and the people and the clients within the organization, and monitoring what is happening and reporting back to the board so that the board can give their wisdom. Next slide. What about when a disruption happens? Now, I differentiate between incident response and crisis management. We know that the incident is likely to create a crisis affecting maybe the finances, affecting stakeholders and so on. So the board does crisis management, the broader picture, managing the broader picture that has happened as a result of the disruption, mobilizing resources, giving oversight and making those tough decisions which cannot be made at the executive level, and continuously communicating with a broader stakeholder group who have an interest in the disruption. Then the executive, of course, must manage the incident response, must make sure that data is protected, must make sure that forensic data is collected and any regulatory or technical reporting is done, and overseeing the implementation of emergency operations for those operations that have been hit by the digital disruption. By the way, if you're feeling that this is a lot of information to take in, please be aware that all this is going to be in the form of reports and other materials, which you can continue to access through the KICTANet website. So don't worry, just make notes of a few key points, but this information will continue to be accessible to you. Next slide. So when the disruption is over, the post-disruption, the board has to make sure we've learned our lessons, that we've reviewed any policies and strategies that need to be reviewed because of that learning, that they're ready and planning for any big organizational investments that need to be made, either in technology or capacity building or any other issue, and that they are managing the stakeholder transparency and accountability and rebuilding trust with the stakeholders wherever it may have been harmed. For executive role, there's the post-incident operational recovery, the hardening of systems and data protection, recovering our supply chain with our suppliers, reviewing internal standards, processes, and procedures in the light of what has happened, and preparing and submitting any regulatory reports that are required or legal reports that are required, and creating awareness among staff and clients based on what has been happened, and building their capacity for greater resilience in the future. Next slide. Then we have the whole issue of appraising. How have we done? The strategy is not an end point. It is part of the journey. It's the vehicle in which we're moving to get to our end points. So we need to look at that document in the light of anything that happens and review it where we have found that it has a weakness. And we can review it in the light of any digital disruptions, any disruptive emerging technologies that are coming into the market. And those can provide opportunities as well as risks. They can actually make us stronger. So we need to look at that as well. And also new forms of crime and criminal enterprise and any emerging regulation. Creating a culture of data collection and analysis so that our decisions are really data and information based, watching trends, and owning our organization when it comes to the digital realm. Of course, you can also, you don't have to wait until it happens to you. You can also appraise other organizations' challenges. And this is one area I'd really challenge all of you to form coalitions so that whenever something happens to one of you, you can actually come together and analyze what happened so that everybody learns from everybody else's challenges and opportunities. And working in that way will ease the heavy load that is sometimes created by digital disruptions. Next slide. So in summary, all of us have to be digitally resilient in today's world. We've just become too exposed to the digital realm and really reliant on the digital realm for much of what we do. I keep emphasizing that resilience is a journey, not a destination. I also emphasize, and this is why we're doing this training, that boards and senior management must put digital resilience on their agenda if their organizations are to survive, develop, and thrive. And then creating an effective strategy, and this has just given you some pointers about how you go about that, will require at least those 6 steps which I have laid out for you today. The next slide is just a list of references. So I think when you get the materials, you can try and get there. Now, before we go to the policy, then I'd ask Neno and Jace, please, to guide us in a small interactive exercise so that this is not just a talk shop, you also get an opportunity to do something and give us some feedback. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope you enjoy the interaction. Neno and Jace, whoever's there, please guide them in going through this interactive exercise.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Gitao. My name is Neno.
No, you are very faint. We can't hear you.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's much better.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Newa. We'll be doing a slight interactive session. So if you are able, please join the Slido interaction on this link. Also sending it on the chat so that you can have access to it. So I'll give you some time to be able to join the session. I will just do around 4 questions to be able to get more understanding on where we are as organizations. So let me give you some time to do that.
So once again, click on the link or scan the
I'll
QR
scan the
code.
code. Yeah.
And then I hope we'll be able to show some of the emerging results.
Yes. We'll be able to present them in a few. So as you can see, there's a screen of the polls that are coming in. So those are just some of the responses we are getting. So the first question is, which of the following steps does your organization's digital resilience strategy contain? As you can
Only
see,
2 people have participated.
yeah, it's only
Maybe
2
we
people
can,
who have come in.
yeah.
So
Do we
let's
have more?
yes, now more answers are coming in.
Naima?
Yes, Jacinta.
Please allow me to remind them that the responses are anonymous. So we just want to have a feel of the room and to see if you've understood some of the concepts and just to gauge where you are in your digital resilience roadmap. So feel free to answer. They're anonymous.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me give some 30 seconds before we move to the next question. In the light of time, I'm only seeing around 9 people have joined the poll. Then we'll also be able to discuss some of these responses in our summary and question and answer session. So yeah, we'll be able to give you feedback.
Neno, I think we haven't managed time very well, so perhaps we can just have 2 questions and then we go on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's all right. So with that, we can now go to the next question, the second question. So for the second question, it's what has been the key challenge in developing a digital resilience strategy for your organization? So you can just type a short answer there. Yes, and you'll be able to find solutions. So I can see around 3 people are typing. Someone says they had no idea on how to go about it, which is why we're having some of these trainings. Someone else says it's too complicated. I would need help on how to navigate this. These are some of the challenges that the Tatua Digital Resilience Centre is coming to address. So we'll be able to help you in that. Someone says we are a startup, hence it's taking time to start it up. The knowledge gap awareness is also there. Defining and building a case for the development of a digital resilience strategy for a CSO. So these are very good answers. And let me give another like 30 seconds to get some more responses. Yes, someone else says we're having no idea and also financial resources to do it. Another answer is noting the depth of issues that a resilience strategy would need to consider. Diverting extra finances towards the proper design and implementation is difficult. Sourcing funds for this is also difficult. In some of these, maybe Dr. Gitao and Dr. Paula will help us find out how we can do this, especially because I've seen the financial issue is also coming up. So there's also lack of knowledge, no management commitment, and insufficient human resources and capacity. So with that, I think we will stop there with the poll, and then we'll be able to discuss them in the question and answer section. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neno.
Asante.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Neno. I think that was useful, especially the feedback that you typed, because, you know, that
Yes.
really gives us a reality check about where you are. So I know the presentations sound complex, but you'll see as we move on and we look at things like the playbooks or Dr. Paula's case, you'll begin to see some small things that you can already do. And also the presence of the Tatua Center will be there to do a lot of hand-holding, I believe cost effectively, but Kivuva will tell us at the end, or Victor, how you will be supported in this journey. Jace, we can continue with the policy presentation. So as I wait for the policy presentation to be put back up, I can say that the strategy had those 6 steps. But one of the challenges that we face as we develop, or rather we make decisions, there are usually a lot of decisions to be made as we go through the digital resilience journey. And decision making, it's done by leaders, and it's not an easy thing to do in a consistent and fair way. So one of the documents that we can prepare to help ourselves, I don't know why it's just remaining at Slido and not going back to the presentation, Jace. Please, you can troubleshoot for me. So one of the, just go to the next slide. So
Just
one of the things we can do.
There's a bit of feedback, sorry.
Somebody's, please switch off your mics.
Jess, you might need to mute. I think there's a bit of feedback. Okay, I think that's better. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll just introduce the topic. I'll show why the governance is, the responsibilities of boards and leaders include the ones listed there: governance, risk management, communication, incident management, resource allocation. Of course, there are others, but this is a broad summary of the areas which we feel are really priority when it comes to digital resilience. So our policy will help ease the decision making, as you'll see. Next slide. Okay, so what is a policy? So it's a set of guidelines or rules that
dictate how various situations and actions should be handled. So it enables people, the senior people, the technical people, the decision makers in the organization to do the thinking in advance and to pre-digest scenarios. I think those of you who are parents, you really suffered when your kids were growing up, you know, when they reach the why stage. Why this, why that, what this and that. And, you know, your brain gets tired because you really have to think up a unique answer to every innovative query. And an organization, especially when we're in a very fluid situation, such as a digital disruption, it can become overwhelming, the number of decisions and so on that need to be made. And if you can do some of the thinking in advance and create a policy, then you can quickly make the decision because the thinking has already been done. And this helps you to act consistently, reasonably, to comply with laws and regulations, which is also very important because, as I'll tell you during the playbook, it's possible that, for example, you've heard of ransomware attacks. In some countries, it is illegal to pay the ransom. So somebody may come and some criminal group may threaten your organization, and then you think that the best thing to do in this case is to pay the ransom so that we can continue with our operations. And then you find yourself in a new problem, a new digital disruption, because there's a law that says it is illegal to pay the ransom when you are the subject of a ransomware attack. So now the problem is not the criminal anymore, it is the regulator. Yeah, and then of course, to be aligned with your mission and values. Will a digital disruption to cause you to take a decision or make an action that is not aligned with your core values? If you create policy, it will help you not to get into that situation. So resilience needs policy because you have a strategy, which we have discussed. It develops and mainstreams the right culture and values. Yeah, without a policy, you might just be making random decisions, and people find it very difficult to learn. You know, I know as parent, I'm not a parent, that's why I'm using the example of parents. For example, you set a bedtime because you want your children to get enough rest. If you keep changing, so you've set the bedtime, but every day you say, okay, now we're going out. Now I'm asking for takeaway. So the decisions you're making do not mainstream the culture that you're trying to build. And after a while, it becomes a nonsense. So it's the same thing with resilience. If our decisions are not consistent with the culture and values, then our resilience efforts will not be consistent. And of course, order needs to be maintained in disruptive situations. So policy helps with that. So it is the responsibility of boards and corporate leaders or SJO leaders to prioritize, lead, enable, and guide resilience. Yeah. So we need policies that make digital resilience a key responsibility of the board. And that's what that statement is saying. I'm not going to read all of them because you'll get the materials, and of course, we have to manage time. So digital resilience shall be included as a key responsibility of the board within the board charter. All board members shall receive awareness and training in digital resilience during their board member orientation. So you see, if that's the policy, then you're sure that every board member is aware and active in the digital resilience. Then there'll be leadership policies there, and I'm not going to read them. There'll be enabling. Yeah, so that one I'll read because it's important. So the board shall annually approve a dedicated budget for programs to advance organizational digital resilience, equivalent to not less than 10% of the budget for digital technology. Now, that's not a standard, but you can see that if you make such a policy, it ensures that there will always be a bit of money reserved for digital resilience activities as a priority. So this is what policy looks like. It makes sure that we do the right thing. Next slide. I can see I really need to move. Yeah. So guiding, there'll be policies that guide. So you could say that digital resilience is a standing agenda item in all board meetings. You can say that you're going to look at the digital resilience capacity when you're recruiting ahead of the organization, because of course the board is in charge of recruiting the head. It's one of their responsibilities. So you remember in the assessment tool, there was the issue of outsourced services. So I've really had experience of this in my work in the public sector, because I had to set this policy because of what I have gone through in the public sector. So that reads, where digital services are outsourced, the service shall be guided by a good contract and a strong service level agreement, guaranteeing an acceptable quality of service. So you see, if the board sets that responsibility, when management comes and says we want to outsource to cloud services, or we want this kind of technology support, then the board will be asking the question, do you know the board's policy is that you must have a good contract and a service level agreement? And you'll be able to check that. And if management doesn't provide it, of course, you will send them back to the drawing board. Next slide. Risk management is another responsibility of boards, and it's a very primary responsibility. Yeah. So you should instigate policies that make sure that risk management is happening and that it is mainstreamed in organizational practice. Next slide. I believe there's a sample policy which I can show you. So there's the processes of risk identification, mitigation, and so on. So there are policies there which are listed under identification. For example, motivating an emerging technology scan. So if AI comes up, then the board motivates management to look at that technology and see whether it's going to impact the organization in any substantial way. Risk mitigation, there's risk avoidance, risk reduction, transfer and acceptance, and there are issues there. For example, you may decide to transfer risk by considering cybersecurity insurance. Yeah, so under each of these, I've actually put draft policies, which you can look at and see whether they're relevant for your organization. I wouldn't cut and paste all of them, but prioritize some of those which find some resonance with your organization. Then, of course, risk management. For example, there's a policy there that the board shall charge management to maintain and regularly update a risk register. So that sets the agenda for management. Should a risk be realized, the board shall require a full report. And you saw in the assessment tool that we asked whether the board was receiving reports. So if they create a policy, then management is obliged to provide that report. And therefore that can address the issue. If the assessment tool, you have to say no there, one of the actions you can take is to create a policy so that in future your board will receive such reports. Next slide. Communication, you remember I said that communication is a very important aspect of digital disruptions. And secondly, it is one of the key responsibility of boards and organizational leaders. So communication must be part. We must have communication policies. Now, what I've tried to say there is these are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself in order to know whether or how you need to communicate. So did the disruption touch on a legal issue? Is the disruption likely to cause any inconvenience, embarrassment, or loss to any of your stakeholders, meaning your clients, your funders, your partners? Is anybody going to suffer as a result of a digital disruption that you are experiencing? You need to ask yourself that question. When is the ideal time to release the communication? We talk about not causing panic. We talk about, causing, the regulation may require us to release within a certain time frame and so on. How should different groups of stakeholders be approached or communications? So you look at all your classes of stakeholders and how are you going to communicate with them? A very interesting one, which I actually picked from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI in the US. I was privileged to be part of a capacity building in which they were there. And I learned something, that for them, they actually have glossaries of language which should be used or language which should not be used, or words to avoid misunderstanding, offense, exaggeration, or incitement. So you should look at the words that you're using in English, in Swahili, or any other language you're communicating in and say, no, 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 no. In any of our communications, this word should not appear, or it should be phrased in this way to so that the communication will not be misunderstood. And how can the organization handle any questions, feedback, backlash that might ensue from the communication you've just sent out? We talk about the phone lines being clogged. You can say something like, if you say there's just been a bomb blast in a certain area, you know that every parent whose child who has a school in that area is going to start calling. And after a while, nobody will be able to get through. So you have to consider how are you going to respond to the feedback that comes along as a result of anything that you communicate. And then a very important one, especially for boards and leaders, who is best placed to convey this message? You know, when people may say the person is too senior to be dealing with this issue, or the person is too junior, we don't want to listen to them because they don't have authority or something like that. So we have to choose the best person to convey the message. Go on. So there are those questions. Why? There should be policy on the types of incident when communication becomes necessary. Whether is when should we communicate and when should we withhold communication? Who? I've just talked about who will make this communication. Yeah, at what level of the organization, at what level of technical expertise will they be able to answer any questions that come about? If it's a press briefing or something or a media event, you have to have the person there who can answer the type of questions that might ensue as a result of that communication. And what, again, I learned from the FBI, I don't take credit, they develop communication templates. So, they don't just have to draft a communication when the incident is occurring. There's a template that gives the basic structure, so they just fill in the details so they're able to very quickly and effectively communicate based on the template. Then how, who is the target audience, and what are the most appropriate channels for reaching that target audience, and when, as I've already stated, at what point. So this is all things you'll have to discuss with your communications people in your organization and get them to start working on this. So digital resilience is about the whole organization working in their areas of expertise to support the organization in times of digital disruption. So the incident management policy, pre-disruption, there's some actions there for the board, and the policy, there's some policies there which may be considered by the executive. I'll just maybe mention one because of time. So the board shall approve an incident classification scheme. So some of those decisions, like how to communicate, will depend on the severity of the digital disruption. So you need to come up with a classification scheme that tells us, is this one very severe? Is it critical? Is it existential? Existential means it might lead to the end of your organization altogether. Sorry, I don't know why things have disappeared. Okay, and then for the executive policy, the organizational digital resilience strategy shall include pre-disruption programs to support the implementation of excellent governance, architecture, and capacity building measures. So you can see the difference between the board and the executive policy, and this gives us them the framework in which to work. Next slide. In disruption, the board is being asked to utilize the playbooks which you have developed in advance. The executives will have a policy that they can make some emergency decisions without recourse to the board, but they must report within 48 hours of implementation, because sometimes you have to make quick decisions. So if you have to call the board member, have a board meeting and all that, then it may be too late. So we allow them to make some emergency decisions, but we also expect them to report within a reasonable time frame what they have done and why, and what the implications are. Next slide. Post-disruption, of course, this is having a policy to have those post-mortem activities. The board may require to do some extra budgeting to meet the damage, to repair the damage, and to restore operations or to implement alternative operational methods. And the executive, of course, will have additional reporting requirements because there'll be a lot going on in the organization as they repair it and return operations to normal. Next slide. Resource allocation, another very important responsibility of the board. And remember that resilience is all about unscheduled and unexpected incidents. None of us were expecting our living rooms to flood. None of us were expecting a family member to get COVID and go into ICU, and then we have to raise $2,500 a day for their treatment. It's unscheduled and it's unexpected, and it can greatly affect the organization. So we need emergency resources to enable the smooth handling of such incidents. They can be very financially expensive, so you may have to address them through regular savings, which the board can approve in the policy. Help one another, cooperatives, Harambe, who can you ask to give you a bit of money to tide you through this difficulty? But also now I see there's some companies which are offering cybersecurity insurance, so you may also consider that as an option. Remember that money is not the only resource that will be needed. There will be the time of technical staff will be diverted from their normal activities to addressing the disruption. Then there's other stakeholders, even communication and all that may be costly, and time also. You know, even the board members, they may have to abandon some of their normal activities and start devoting attention to assisting the organization. So the budget should not only be about time, but also about energy. And I mean, not just about money, but time, energy, and people. Of course, a special case is extortion incidents such as ransomware. It's very bad practice to pay, and some places it's even illegal to pay. But I know that some people are forced to pay, so I'm not saying that it will never happen, but I'm just saying it's really bad practice to pay ransoms because it really encourages them to continue in this bad practice. And also they're criminals, so you may pay, but they don't do what they promise to do. In summary, Policy is important to support legal, mission-sensitive, fair, and consistent actions towards cyber resilience. We've covered 5 board responsibilities that may need policy to help the board take those kind of good actions when faced with a digital disruption. Those are governance, risk management, communication, incident management policy, and resource allocation. Of course, each organization will be unique, so you may have more policies or less, but what you've been given is the basics, which you can already use and incorporate and mainstream into your organization. Again, there are references on the next page, but we won't go through them. They'll become available to you to use in the future. Thank you very much. And I'm going to quickly jump into the playbook, which I hope you will enjoy. So let's just go to the next slide. So a playbook, well, it will tell you what a playbook is. So it's needed when there's digital disruption, because usually they're sophisticated and technically complex. They come in at high speeds and they can scale up very rapidly. COVID, I don't know how long it gave us. It gave us about a month. But digital disruptions can be, yes, months, years, but they can also be milliseconds. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty seeing the presentation. Whoops, at the very time I don't need this. I'm having a digital disruption. Please just be patient. Okay. Can you hear me? Because it seems to have frozen. Okay, there we are.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you.
You can see the screen. Yep.
I had a small digital disruption.
Sorry about that.
Okay. One of the problems is uncertainty and psychological impact. You know, it's really confusing, disheartening, and so on. And this affects the entire organization when such a thing happens. We lack prior experience, and sometimes we don't know who can help. There may be regulatory and legal considerations, and also sometimes our dirty linen is right in the public space with social media saying things which are not helpful to the situation and trending and all that. So these are very difficult situations, and that's why playbooks can help to reduce complexity and guide decisions when we're in this difficult situation. So it's designed as a guide. It's a critical resource to support effective, coordinated, and timely responses, because if we have to redesign the wheel, it's really going to take time. And of course, everybody in the organization is involved, so coordinating them becomes a problem. So it typically outlines the roles, responsibilities, and actions that board members and executive leadership and each others and even others should take to manage the crisis and minimize damage. Next slide. Okay, so the structure, I'll sort of run through it because of timing. So you'd have the introduction and the reference. So like the name of the playbook, you have a reference number and a record of the times it's been updated, because it will have to be updated, because as you use it, you learn new things. Who is the target audience of that playbook? So you can just circle. You can have all these categories and you can circle the ones that apply. And then you list out the purpose and objective. Then there's a description of the generic type of the cyber incidents, examples of that type of incident, the threat level, whether it's serious. Of course, you will not develop playbooks for very minor incidents because people know how to deal with those ones. But if it's serious, if it's critical, or if it's existential, I told you existential is when your organization may die as a result of that disruption. So you need to know whether the playbook is at which level. Then the possible threat actors, those who are involved. It could be hacker, hacktivists, campaigners, criminal enterprises. Actually, nowadays, some people are in the business of cybercrime, and it's becoming very disturbing because they build very complex organizations whose job is cybercrime. Of course, states and others. Then the motives, whether it's to steal money or intellectual property or data or other things, whether it's to perform surveillance, whether it's to make themselves famous, whether it's to embarrass your organization, or if there's an unknown motive. The way they operate, is it a standard way that is known by the market, or is it a new way, innovative, or it's previously, what is called zero-day? Zero-day disruption means it's never been seen before. You are the first person to experience this kind of disruption. And then what response is your attacker expecting? Is it extortion? Are they expecting you to defend yourself, to fight back, to counterattack? Or they don't want you to know they're there, so they don't expect any response. In fact, the longer you can remain ignorant that you are the subject of a disruption, the happier they'll be. And then how much time do you have to respond? Does it need an immediate response? Is it in minutes, hours, days, or there are no deadlines? Next slide. Okay, so the team and the roles, and this will be a very interesting part because it will show you what you need to do in different parts of your organization. So the board, major decisions and resource approval, the leadership, liaising between the organization and the board and seeking help from partners, the C-suite managers, and there's one who I will mention explicitly, who is the human resource or training and development, because humans are very much part of this picture. They need to be supported. Some of them will have been working for 3 days without sleeping, and it's the HR manager who will say no. They have to go home and sleep for at least 8 hours as per the law and good practice before they come back and continue fighting this. So your HR manager, and I'm going to make it a category, is a very important part of your senior management in managing digital disruptions. Communications, we've already talked about, so the PR or communications manager, your technical staff, both the cybersecurity and ICT staff, are very much involved in the technical incident response and protecting the digital assets of the organization. Just go on, next slide. The legal, and you'll see in the example that the legal officers need to know how this is affected by and affecting the law and develop required responses. And if you can do that in advance in a playbook, it will be much cheaper and easier for you than seeking legal assistance when the disruption is already ongoing. So all this can go into your playbook in advance and you'll see it. Your operations, how they regroup and modify, can they go from digital operations to manual operations in line with the business continuity plan? And the staff complying with the communication strategy. If the press calls your IT manager, you shouldn't say, oh, it's a disaster. Actually, all the personal data has been lost. Yeah, the communication strategy will say that information is not for you to disclose. It will be disclosed in a legal fashion by the right person at the right time. So you guys are not supposed to be talking about this at this time. Law enforcement, do you need to report to the police? And they may need to guide you about preserving evidence in a way that it is usable in court, including the digital evidence. The national or industry computer incident response team may become involved, especially if it's a big incident, to provide support. The SOC, that is the Security Operations Center or the Network Operations Center, They'll be collecting a lot of data which is related to your digital disruption, if it is, for example, malware. So they should also be in the picture to be collecting data that will help us to fight the attack, both in the present and in the future. Then administration, a very important one, which is often left out. So I'm proud to have included it. You have to coordinate the response because there's so many people. Can you already see the list? Maintain the log of activities, maintain the directory of all these contacts so that you have all the phone numbers and contact information, and manage all the incident records and archives so that at the end of the day, nothing is lost. It's all properly coordinated and gathered. Then you have the communication strategy, the directory of contacts, a dictionary of terms, which I've already mentioned, taking the best practice from the FBI, the key messages, the frequency of message sharing, the definition of stakeholders and how they need to be approached, the type of channels you're using, who is communicating the information, and what information should be withheld temporarily or permanently, especially that which may benefit criminals or which is legally sensitive. Then data management, of course, there's the forensic data, but there's also things like the minutes of all the meetings that you're having with the stakeholders, a record of the demands being made by hostile actors, a record of the requests for assistance you're making and the way people are responding, the help they're offering or telling you that they can't help you, the technical logs of all the activity in your digital assets and your digital resources and technology, the teams and their partner who was involved and managing them even from an HR point of view, and the incident narrative of what happened, how you responded, what succeeded and what failed. So all this is part of managing the data that is being generated around. Now, the legal strategy. So whenever there's a type of incident, sometimes it spans borders. And I'm glad today that I've seen there are people from Tanzania, from Uganda, our neighbors, and Rwanda, all our neighbors and beyond. So sometimes the incident cannot just be dealt with your local law because that doesn't extend beyond your borders. So you need to identify any provisions in international law, provisions in treaties and conventions. And here in Africa, we have the Malabo Convention that was ratified last year. So you can use that, for example, to get legal or law enforcement assistance, even from another country. For example, if the attack is emanating from another country. In Europe, we also have the Budapest Convention. There's constitutional provisions, and you'll see an example. There are also laws in each country, especially data protection, cybercrime, etc. Those laws may apply. And what I'm asking you to do in the playbook is to identify in advance which of these things apply so that when the thing happens, you don't start looking for the law library. You're able to quickly act. There are also norms of responsible behavior and confidence building measures. And while those are not legally binding, they also empower us when we're making requests to other countries because many of them have already subscribed to these norms. Next slide. So the board crisis management, they may be involved in things like approval of extraordinary budget, mobilizing resources, setting the goalposts in negotiation with hostile actors, what you can do and not do, when you stop talking to them or whatever. What concessions to hostile actors are allowed and those which are no-go area. We don't allow that at all. And actions in mitigation of organizational existential threats. Executive, they lead the negotiation processes. They make decisions to partner with other organizations or procure extraordinary assistance. And they are the point of engagement with law enforcement and regulators because they know more about what's happening in the organization. Okay, so you've gotten an idea of what a playbook looks like. So the 6 that I have identified that are maybe very relevant, and we'll try to have basic ones developed for each of these, which you can look at and modify and update for your organization. Advanced persistent threat, I'll show you that. Digital asset theft, which could be money, data, or intellectual property. Disruption of operations, and I include distributed denial of service attacks within the idea of disruption of operations. Emerging technology opportunities and threats. Failure to comply with digital regulations. About a year ago, many organizations in Kenya were caught up by the data protection regulations, and there were some mass fines. So that also be a digital disruption. And malware, including ransomware. And Dr. Paula, I hope she'll have a few minutes to discuss with you about ransomware. So there's a sample one. The reason I chose the advanced persistent threat is the issue that many of you are worried about, which is domestic surveillance. Surveillance from your governments and so on. I'm telling you that your worries about you and I about you can reach the actual initial. So let's look into that, but it gives a date when it was created and what kind of a playbook incident, which I said it includes state-sponsored SJO, espionage, or domestic surveillance of SJO digital technology falls into this category. The threat level, I put it as serious, but you'll tell me whether it is critical or existential. Possible threat actors could be the state or it could be others. Possible motives are surveillance, to embarrass the organization, or even to collect data in order to deregister you and such like. The modus operandi tends to be fairly standard, but there may be some innovative ones coming up, so I'm not excluding them. But the one the playbook will deal with is the standard one. The expected response is none, because you're not supposed to know that you're being surveilled. And the response time, because of that, there's no deadline, but of course, the sooner the better. Next slide. Governance role. The board will need budgets to harden your technology because you need better technology, and to approve a budget for advanced malware detection. The leadership, the CEO should continuously explain the risk to the board and gain support, so they'll support them. Coordination, cascading the data protection, cyber hygiene to all the staff, because the inroad to these kind of surveillance attacks is usually through staff and stakeholders. So if they're aware of the cyber hygiene and they're practicing them, then that's very important. And of course, that will also be an HR responsibility. Communication, classifying your information so that you very well protect your sensitive data. And also you become transparent in some issues. So, people always look for secrets. So if you're a little bit transparent, they feel less need to surveil you clandestinely. Cybersecurity needs to advise the organization on secure tools and technology, and to perform patches, because of course they're also looking for weaknesses in your systems to enter the technology. Monitoring the systems for unusual network activity, which can also be a sign of surveillance, and monitoring the data to see if something is happening to it. So these are some of the actions that the playbook tells the cybersecurity people to do. The legal officers national and international legal frameworks that discourage surveillance. So in Kenya, I've listed some of them. Article 31 of the Constitution, sections 14, 15, 17, and 22 of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act, and others there. So for each of your playbooks, that will be listed out so that whoever you are asking to give you legal help, you can already point them in the right direction and say, there's a legal element to this covered by the following legal instruments. Operations, you may have to have a manual element to interrupt the digital so that people cannot see anything. Law enforcement, if there are legal complaints you can make using those legal provisions. Getting information from certs, SOCs, NOCs is important, and administration should be managing all the documents and data that is collecting in a very orderly manner so that you have a comprehensive view of the issue. Pointers to using a playbook, it's not a script to be followed religiously, but it gives a general outline of the action, quick and effective action, but it may need to be tailored within the context of a specific disruption. Assembling the incident response team and coordinating and harmonizing their actions is very important and should need some administrative support and some capacity building to teach people to work together in these kind of complex situations. The board is not supposed to be hands-on, but they can make many pre-planned decisions so that that leaves the executive free to handle the incident without always having to come back to the board for position. And I think the main thing that really comes out to me as I look at a playbook is that incident response is not purely a technical function. Everybody in the organization can contribute positively to defend systems and keep operations working. Next slide. So in summary, doing the intellectual work or seeking help to develop these playbooks can help a simple and under-resourced organization to deal with very complex situations in an orderly and effective manner. Remember, they have to be specific. Maybe you can coalesce together to refine playbooks for your specific sector to take into account your threat landscape. Remember that a playbook is not set in stone and it will be revised and updated every time it is used, because then it's tested, evaluated, and improved through practical use. So there are a few references there. Most of them are technical playbooks. So don't be discouraged. I'm the one now working on completing the more organizationally broad playbooks, and those will also become available to you. So thank you very much. I believe I'm now going to hand over to Paula, who I have only left 3 or 4 minutes, a couple of minutes, but can we be allowed maybe another 10 or 15 minutes so that we give you all the information? Please.
Okay, that is okay, Doctor.
Okay, so go ahead, Paula. We'll give you some information on a different type of attack, which is a ransomware attack.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Getao, for such great content. I know we'll be having a chance for Q&A and to debrief somewhat to see whether we can digest some of the great insights we have received. Jacinta, kindly allow me to just share on my side, in case I just made a few changes as I was listening to Dr. Getao. So allow me to just take us through a small scenario of ransomware. And, we insisted on talking about ransomware because it's one of those scenarios that is likely to affect an organization in this day and age. Ransomware is where you have some type of malware, malicious software running on your platforms, and its aim is to lock them down or basically restrict or deny access to those systems. The reason why this is done is to bring about, just a disruption. but also because there's a monetary element where the attackers are expecting some payment. And this is actually the reason why ransomware is likely not just to remain a challenge today, but also in the future. There is a monetization component to it. It's not just to disrupt, but also to earn money. And the landscape, the ransomware landscape has been that it's no longer just locking your systems. What typically happens is that the malware will, first of all, try and copy the data in your systems. And the attacker will lay low for a while, just copying that data and transferring it out of your systems to the attacker's control. And then thereafter is when the systems will be locked. And this data that has been moved or exfiltrated will be used as a way of, leveraging a form of extortion. That if you don't pay, then we have your data and we're going to disclose it. And this will not just only bring about reputational damage and embarrassment, but now because of data protection legislation, you will also be, castigated by the Data Protection Office. And this is exactly what happened to a retailer in Kenya last year. And that's why now we're just no longer just looking at it as a disruptive event. It can also have legal consequences and fines attached to it. So this type of attack became very popular from May of 2017. So that's 7 years. We're in May, we're just coming to the end of May. This is like about 7 years ago. And this type of malware did not need any action from any human being to propagate. So you can't say that I copied my data to a USB and the USB was infected. Or I sent you an email and you opened the email and that's why you got infected. And this is a critical point. This ransomware moved in a worm-like manner. It just crawled all over the internet and looked for machines that had specific openings or ports. We call them ports. And the unfortunate thing is that it leveraged on a very popular file sharing service called SMB, where a majority of the Windows machines had that service on and facing the internet. So any machine that is facing the internet, and I can tell you these are many, including the ones that we rely on for very many services like web services and email, they're facing, or even database systems, they're facing the internet and they're leveraging on some of these file services and inter-process communication services. And this ransomware was very clever in being able to scan the network where it was, identify those machines, check if they had any of those weaknesses, and then infect the machine. So this worm, in just under a day, had crawled over 230,000 machines all over the world, spanning 150 countries. Now, Dr. Getao mentioned zero-day exploits. Basically, it's using an attack method that we have not seen before. So this particular ransomware took advantage of a zero-day that was known, unfortunately, just within a circle of national security agents. But the national security agents had been hacked, and that's how the cyber criminals got to know about this particular weakness. So that already tells you, and I'm not saying this of the national security agencies, but I'm saying this also of cyber criminals. They trade in 0 days. Right now, we have a certain view of technology, but there's that which is traded among cyber criminals as well, where they know there's some weaknesses on our machines, but they will not say, they will not tell anyone, so that those weaknesses are not closed. So that whenever they need to use those weaknesses, they can use them to gain access. And that's why we are saying ransomware attacks are likely to continue. And I'll be sharing some statistics. As of 2023, 72% of organizations had been attacked by ransomware. So this is no longer just the annoying malware that just makes your machine go slow and close. You restart it and then it becomes okay, or you uninstall a few things. This one aims to just lock up your machine. So we're also saying that cyber criminals are organizing themselves into proper organizational structures. Just the same way in your social justice organization, you have a board, you have management, you have sales and marketing, you have engineers who implement your solutions, you have customer service. Well, the cyber criminals are running organizations in just a similar way. And one of the services they're offering their clientele who would like to have their hacking services is ransomware. And now we might be thinking, oh, ransomware is just for these big organizations. No, the latest data breach investigations report, I'm removing this data from there, 2024, basically says now people are paying as low as $3. So I am identifying you. Okay, fine. You tell me you can't pay. Okay, I can monetize. Give me $3 per device, and I'll send you an decryption code. So they're now adjusting and saying we don't have to only go for the big organizations where we had been seeing ransomware payouts of going into millions of dollars. No, we are saying we can customize our costs and make it affordable as well. So this is now the scenario we're finding ourselves. So just maybe to make it, I don't even have time. I had a story that I wanted to read where it was a seemingly ordinary morning on the 28th of May, which is today. And Amani, an IT administrator, had just sat down on his desk, having a fresh cup of coffee ready to start his day. But he just noticed it was no longer as peaceful as he expected it to be at 8 a.m. in the morning. So his phone started buzzing incessantly. There were panicked messages coming into his inbox, and he noticed that the critical systems, even the one that he was sitting down to look into, could not be accessed. And he realized that even the files on the particular SJO he was working on had been encrypted. And when he tried to log in, he was just he received a blue screen of a blue and red screen of death in this case, demanding a payment in order to be able to access that system. So his heart started racing and he panicked. And he now just realized the scale of the crisis he was facing because nothing could be done. None of his IT systems could be accessed, and he had no opportunity to act because everything was coming too fast, too soon, too fast. He had to talk to his management, and he had no answer to give them. It became clear for him that he was in a devastating situation. His mind raced through all possible solutions, but none seemed to come to mind. So this is Amani. He's no longer in peace, right? So what would you do if you're Amani? And I think we don't even have time to have this full Slido engagement, but could I ask Neno maybe to ask the first two questions? And I really, really like the Slido engagement because it has revealed to us exactly where you are, right? Because we want to also connect with exactly where you are so that we can also customize some simple solutions, even when we are releasing this through Kiktanet, that can really meet you at your very point of need at this point. So Neno, could you please just ask the first two questions? Has your organization experienced a ransomware attack? Has any of you found yourself in this same position that Amani was, losing his peace, right, on the 28th of May, that fateful morning?
Yeah, so we can still join with the same link, the same Slido link.
No, you might need to paste the link again and also inform us to scan the QR.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so one person has responded so far. So thank you very much. Again, as Jess reminded us, this is anonymous. So we are not looking to see who it is. So it's a mix of both. We've been asking for the for the surveys, the assessment tool, but this one is just the in-call engagement. We just want to see where you are. So 3 people have answered. No ransomware. All right, so that's 5. So that's no. Okay, so I think then we've been very lucky. So we had also prepared a few points to think about should this be the situation. I will not go through them because of time. It's already 12:30. It seems that really it's not an issue at this point. But just to say, I just thought to maybe highlight just one feature that I believe we have on our devices that really is included. When you look at the pre, in, and post disruption recommendations, even for ransomware situations, this one feature really keeps on being highlighted. So the first, of course, is we've talked about genuine software, always making sure if it's your operating system, if it's the applications you're running genuine software, and you keep those updated. So the reason why the WannaCry ransomware spread as it did was because some of those systems had not been updated. In fact, when the investigations had been done, it was discovered that Microsoft, just like a month prior, had found a weakness that had already started being discussed in the can I say deep web and in the dark web. And what they did is they released a patch, but only few organizations that were running those Windows systems had already accepted and installed that particular fix. So, of course, it's important to make sure that you have a fix. So the one recommendation that is seen through is about your data. So the recommendation is that you make sure that your data is backed up. So with regards to this, a feature that is in, so Jacinta, in order to just, because I know we don't have time, I'll just talk through it. Instead of now focusing on a lot more of the content, you'll just allow me not to share that. Maybe not share it so that we can just focus on the point I wanted to share, and then we just conclude. So if you could kindly stop sharing. Or how do I, maybe I can take over. Okay, there we go. All right, so so the one recommendation that I don't want to inundate you with more details, just want to keep it simple. The one thing that is talked about is data backup. The ability to back up your data and your software and just be able to reinstall clean versions of your software. So one simple solution that we all have access to is that you can actually map your device, your endpoint device, to some form of backup. Many of your Apple machines or even Windows-based machines have a feature to be able to enable cloud-based backup. Your phones have that. You have a feature that enables cloud-based backup so that if your device gets infected and gets locked up, you just get a new device. Make sure that that new device is clean. Make sure that your new endpoint is clean, and you're able to synchronize back the data in a very clean way. So that's a very simple solution. Now, I don't know how many of you can say, if I was to put up the poll question, but we won't right now, how many of you can say you've activated that feature on your, I know maybe on your phones it is, on your laptops where you have a folder in your laptop that is synchronized to the cloud, and any device, any data that you put into that folder, for many of the Windows systems, it's a OneDrive folder that is linked to the account you've logged in with. For OneDrive, you have 1 terabyte free. So you guys who have any Office 365 solution, you've just logged in onto your Windows machine, you have 1 terabyte free. For the Apple users, you have a similar thing for your cloud backup, right? So how many of you have actually enabled that feature, and you're sure that the data that is sensitive is always backed up, or rather the ones that you don't want to lose is also backed up, okay? Now, of course, we are always told, whatever you put in the cloud, just know that it's, it's accessible, it's on a different platform. So some people also will put maybe an encryption feature on top of that to make sure any of their sensitive data is also encrypted, in addition to it being backed up in the cloud, all right? So with that, I believe we should have addressed the ransomware issue. We thought it may be more prevalent than has been said, but probably because of time, we don't need to go really deep into it because it seems not to be a real big issue at that point. So thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you for being patient and listening in through. We've been tracking the chat. I don't know if there's any question that has been posted on the chat that we need to respond to. So now we are stepping into the Q&A. And as we step into the Q&A session and engagement, we'll have the entire panel. Dr. Getao is here, I'm here. We have the KICTANET team present here to be able to receive your comments, your questions, your feedback, and we'll be able to respond. Jacinta is also alerting us about the pre-workshop, the post actually. We now have a post-workshop survey. And Jacinta, maybe you can share that link. And we can be having the Q&A session as we also field the post-workshop survey to see whether this was beneficial to you. Jacinta?
Yeah, I'm sharing it.
All right, thank you so much. So Kevin Kijambu says, our OneDrive provides 5 GB of free cloud storage. I know if you have, I think maybe it might be tired depending on whether you have Office 365. I think those ones have 1 terabyte, 1 terabyte of storage. In my case, I have 1 terabyte. I can actually verify that just now. So maybe it might be dependent on whether you have Office 365 or you're just using the normal Windows authentication.
Okay, if at the moment you, I know whether it's Google or
yeah,
Microsoft or anyone, they give limited when you're using the free service. Yes. In that case, it is important to prioritize, and that is why you get a data management strategy that tells you what is the critical data in your organization. We all know when we lose our phones, the things that make us wanna cry is the contact lists and the phone numbers. So you can look at your entire data and say, my legal documents, my articles of association, etc., my contact list, etc. These are my existential documents. So even if I can't afford to have a paid subscription that will give me enough data, I can at least prioritize which data is really critical and which can bring my organization to a standstill and make sure that that is backed up. The others, an old trick we used to do was to send it as email attachments. So at least it's on your email, which might give you a little more, but I wouldn't do that for my critical data. If you're on WhatsApp, you can create an Omnia account within your WhatsApp, and some critical documents, like if you are a traveler, your passport page, the bio page of your passport, your ID, your vaccination certificate for COVID, if you have such a thing, your income tax registration certificate. You know, as a person, even you can identify what is your critical data and make sure it's available somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Dr. Fonda, we have another
Yes.
question. Which are some of the cloud encryption services available for use?
So in terms of cloud encryption, so you usually have the option where you can have the cloud provider manage your encryption. So all you just do is like put a setting and say encrypt that data that's on the cloud. Or you can do the encryption, which is now the customer managed encryption yourself. You manage your encryption and then you just upload your encrypted data onto the cloud storage. So it's either the service provider managed encryption or the customer supplied encryption. Okay.
I guess
and there are many encryption algorithms as well. So there's also the selection of what type of encryption algorithm you want to apply, right? And then that also requires some element of a choice to be made, and your key. So you manage your key. If it's a customer supplied encryption, you are responsible for managing the key for encrypting and decrypting. Yeah. Sorry, Dr. Getao.
Sorry also. I was just saying, I don't know whether he wants examples of specific free or paid encryption technology. But the thing I was going to mention is that encryption is a double-edged sword if you are managing it yourself. Because just like house keys, you can lose the key. And then you have difficulty accessing your own data.
Yeah.
So please, it's a very good thing to do, especially when you are protecting your intellectual property or sensitive personal data and so on. But please make sure that you make all the arrangements necessary to manage it, because even you will not. We used to joke with my mom that she's so good at hiding things that she's not even able to find them herself. Yeah, so please take that into account.
Nano, you can, so I think it's the same,
Yes.
same continuation there. Please organize a session for orientation for AI and human rights, for community organizing and the intersection with policy framework on the use of communication devices. I'm a trainer and ED, Young Women Growing Initiative. So thank you so much. Beatrice, I think that comment has been taken in terms of the KICTANET team. Are there any other questions or comments or feedback? You can also feel free to unmute. I think this is a participatory session. You can raise your hand, and I'll probably just allow maybe some 2 more minutes because we have already run out of time. And then if there are no other questions, I will hand over to the KICTANET team.
Okay, thank you so much for that amazing training. And we had Victor here, Kapil. He was to give the closing remarks if he's available.
Thank you, Kivuva. It was a very engaging session, and I really like to thank everybody who participated and for staying throughout the whole.
We can't hear you, Victor.
Sorry, you can't hear me?
We can't hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to say that my role is very simple. Basically, just to give a vote of thanks to everybody who participated in the session. Also just to recognize the various roles that have been played by your team, Dr. Getao, Paula, Dr. Musova, and also Neno for putting together the training materials to make this training possible. Also like to thank Jacinta, who was also a critical member of the team, and also the KICTANET team for organizing and supporting all aspects of these events. Some were not present, but for the team that is present, give over Grace, Ildeji, and others. But more importantly, all the participants for making the time and participating in the session and engaging with the content. I appreciate that this content is new for many of us, but it provides an opportunity for discussion and engagement moving forward. And we hope that the organizations represented will continue to participate in future events and will continue to develop more relevant content for their needs, but also to reach out to them in case of anything. I think lastly, just to wish everybody a good day. We had representation from Tatua board, but I think she had dropped off from Tanzania. Tamo, who was represented earlier. So thank you very much, everybody. Back to you, Kivu.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor, for the closing remarks. And just to reiterate, we thank all the participants, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, who have come through. And because we have the contacts from the registration, we will send these materials across, especially also the report and the feedback. And there's these documents Dr. Getao and Dr. Paula were talking about, that the toolkits and the playbooks, we will make that resource available to all the social justice organizations that are getting support from the Tatua Digital Resilience Centre. So with that, I say, asante sana, and let's meet again on the internet. Have a good evening or good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.